Salish people, and particularly the Duwamish. We thank them tonight, as every night, for our continuing use of the natural resources of their ancestral homeland. And we thank you all for tuning in. Despite these proverbial interesting times in which we find ourselves, it's a bit of a silver lining that we're able to present virtual editions of our programs, standing up a kind of digital stage to serve Town Hall's community of curious and engaged Seattleites. Like everyone who's willing to stare or talk into their computers right now, some for the first time, I'd like to thank Jeffrey, Joseph, and Adel for helping us keep the conversation aloft in Seattle and at Town Hall. Tonight's broadcast is taking place on Crowdcast, as well as our Facebook and YouTube pages. Viewers who want
to... Oh, no.
Mm-mm.
Okay, so it's not just me.
Well,
this is exciting.
It is exciting. I wonder if people can hear us. I think the chat is turned off. Hi, Joseph. I'm gonna pretend people can hear us.
Yeah. Hi, guys. Yeah, the chat. Oh, and
yay! There's the chat.
Oh, the chat's on. Hi, everyone.
Yay! Hey, folks.
Adol's not here.
Howdy, y'all. Sorry, this is Josh from Town Hall.
Hi, Josh.
I'm not sure what happened to where. We're trying to figure out what's going on. Just give us 1 sec. I could invite Adel in, but just give me 1 moment.
Okay.
It's all right. We can vamp.
We can vamp. What up?
I love the we can vamp. Pause. You know, I used to turn my computer when I was doing this so people wouldn't see that I'm just sitting in a big empty basement. But then I decided to go with the concept of not caring, and so now
I can see your bike, and that's cool. Hi, Adel.
Yeah, this is my bike.
Yeah.
Hi, y'all. This is Josh again from Town Hall. I think we're just gonna go ahead with the show now. So, yeah, go right ahead.
Great.
Awesome.
Thank you guys so much for having me. Did you want to kick things off, or do you want me to sort of get rolling?
Go for it.
Do it. I believe in you.
You're the one. So, first of all, thank you all so much for having me for this. This is truly an honor, and I'm very excited. And also, I want to congratulate you guys for writing such a phenomenal book. I finished it in about 36 hours, and it's truly one of the best books I've read in the last decade, and one of the better... and here's something we can get into. I would say one of the better fantasy books I've read, but I don't know if you would... I mean, would you consider this fantasy? I don't know the stipulations. Yeah.
Genre is such a tricky thing and kind of a meaningless thing. Yeah, sure. I mean, it's fantasy. It's definitely like we often get shelved in sci-fi, which I definitely don't think we are really.
Yeah.
I think we got asked recently what genre Night Vale's in, and I decided to go with Jewish folktale. So I do think just everything Night Vale is a Jewish folktale.
You know, there's in the book, I really appreciate a book when it introduces a word to me that I never have seen before. And this was one where a word popped up and I'm like, I've never seen this word. I don't think I've ever heard it. And I Googled it, and it was, I don't even know how to say it because it's brand new to me as of the last couple days. Pogrom?
Oh, wow. Okay. That's super interesting. You know, it's fascinating to me, the things that non-Jews aren't taught about, because pogroms are such a huge part of European history.
Yeah. Well, once I looked it up, it was a very sobering experience.
Yes. Yeah. Violent anti-Semitism was not invented in the 30s. Yeah, pogroms. You know, it was an interesting thing being able to bring some of my family's history into this book in a kind of smaller way. I mean, it's not if you're watching this and you haven't read the book, it's mostly not about pogroms and Eastern European Jews. That's a very small part of the book, but it was enjoyable to bring that in.
Yeah, it's such a great mix of horror, comedy, and just like high adventure. And I fall so hard for like the Brandon Sandersons, the Patrick Rothfuss, Liza Locke-Lamora, like any of those high adventures, those stories and those authors I fall for. And I feel like this was, like I said, one of the best fantasy books I've read it ever. And I feel like what it does is it cuts through all of because there's such a rich world that's just told along the way. And it cuts through all of the sort of bullshit that a lot of the fantasy genres dwell on. And I feel like what this was is like more of a roller coaster than like learning the rules to a board game for 3 hours. Because so many fantasy novels I put down, and again, I don't have to call this a fantasy novel, but it sparked that genre for me, or ticked that box for me, at least when I was reading it, in terms of how fast I was consuming it and how much I wanted to get through that next chapter. But I feel like it was so much fantasy is spent telling you how the magic works in the world, and with this, it was so much about the characters, the relationships, and the situations that I didn't care about, needing to know the rules of any sort of magic or lacking thereof.
I've always liked reading things or even watching things or whatever that don't explain everything to you. Like, I don't like to be purposefully like made confused a lot necessarily, but I like feeling like I just walked into a story in progress a lot of times. I like to think about when we write these books, we want to make sure that the novels aren't just a continuation of something that requires that you listen to 160 episodes of the podcast. We want them to sort of stand alone. And I like the idea that, the faceless old woman gets introduced in this very first chapter of the book in present day, living inside this man Craig's home and her relationship to him. But that's sort of how she got introduced on the podcast too, right? Like, it's just suddenly like, I'm not going to explain. The book is an explanation of why she's a faceless old woman living in Craig's home, but I'm not gonna. I don't need to explain all of the powers, all the rules of Night Vale, all the rules of the history here, except when it pertains to the plot. It's just, I think that's where I come from as a writer too, of wanting just to start as soon as possible and not worry about all of the other details.
Yeah, I appreciate that. As someone, I'm a fan of the podcast, but I have not listened to the entire catalog. So that was something when I first got the book, I was like, is this going to be this Sisyphean task of like going back and trying to figure out what reference this was? But it's totally standalone. There's these nice little Easter eggs peppered in, if you do listen, that I picked up on a few of those where I was like, oh, this is delightful, but not at all intrusive or like necessary in terms of like you have to know about it to enjoy it. But yeah, I really appreciate that it's its own standalone thing, but also gives this rich tapestry to the world that you've already created.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
When you guys write, I'm sure this is something you've talked about before, but it's new to me. And I guess I should introduce, I don't know, I couldn't hear all of what Ware was saying before he got cut off. My name is Adel Rafai. I'm a podcaster as well, and I'm guessing he already introduced Jeffrey Cranor and Joseph Fink, but if not, I want to make sure that those bases are covered. The creators of Welcome to Night Vale, and obviously authors of this book.
And we got to, I'll introduce you because we got to know you through podcasting, because you were one of the three main voices for Hello from the Magic Tavern, which is a comedy fiction improvised podcast, which is super hilarious. And you also do Hey Riddle Riddle with two other friends. So yeah, you and I met at in Chicago one time, and then later we went on the Jack the Ripper tour in London, and that's our relationship.
And you told me that a certain building was called the Gershon because it looks like a pickle.
The Gherkin.
And Gherkin. What did I? Gershon, composer.
Gershwin. Yeah, Ira Gershwin.
But what is just out of my own curiosity, what is the writing process for y'all? Just in terms of, I've collaborated with folks on different endeavors, and there's always a different process. It's always a little bit of a struggle. What do you two do in terms of, I guess specifically on this book, what did you do to make it work so well? Because it reads seamlessly. Like I would never guess that it would be, two different people working on it, because it's such a powerful, unique point of view that works seamlessly.
We were just explaining to some friends of ours last night that our standard joke when we get asked about our writing process is, the pottery scene in Ghost. It's like that, but with a MacBook. But the problem we've found is sometimes when we say that to people who are younger than us, the response is, no, I don't know the movie Ghost. And then the joke just doesn't really land.
You have to update your reference. You have to say that it's like the daughter and the telephone pole in Hereditary.
Oh God. Oh, Jesus. Our writing process is the same for kind of everything we work on. It's something we've sort of developed over the last decade or so, and it works pretty well. It starts with conversation. we just kind of talk through very generally of like, it's a lot of like, here's what I'm excited by. Here's some ideas that seem interesting. And then we try to find the stuff we're both excited by and kind of build on that. Then we go and write separately. We never really collaborate on the rough draft of any like one unit. Usually we'll be like, hey, I'll grab this, you grab this, and then let's meet back and kind of see what we've done. And so once we've done that, obviously there's going to be problems of there's going to be seams. Some story choices will have been different. Characters will have been written slightly differently. And so that point, sort of the first round of editing is just making sure all of that is ironed out. So it does read as though one person were writing it. So that's a very conscious, like, we have to just find where we made different choices and just sort of decide on one or the other for the whole book.
Absolutely. And was this idea, was this something that's been kind of itching in the back of your brains for a while, in terms of ever since you introduced this character, you wanted to give a backstory? Was that something that just kind of stumbled out one day, or what was the inspiration to novelize this?
We this was our third Night Vale novel, and after we wrote the second one, It Devours, we got together to be like, what are we doing next? What should we work on next? Let's come up with some ideas. And then we met up, and both of us had this Faceless Old Woman at the top of our list. She's been on the show quite a bit. When we first, one of the first episodes she's featured in, it's like in our first year, and Mara Wilson, the actor, came on and did the voice, and kind of once Mara was there, kind of gave out so much new personality to this character. So it just, I don't know, you just kind of want to know more about why she is the way she is. There's a lot of her that is really scary and really upsetting, the things that she does to people, but then there's a lot that seems very like caretakery, somebody who's really looking out for your well-being. And so, like, thinking about that moral ambiguity, I think both really, really wanted to know more. And then Joseph brought the book to the table of Count of Monte Cristo, which is, an epic revenge tale. And so, like, kind of having that and thinking about her history as being, hundreds of years in, her saga for revenge being many, many, many years in the making, I think really lent itself well to the idea for the novel.
It's funny, while I was reading it, so I was finishing it up this past Sunday, and I'm obsessed currently with the Last Dance. Are you guys watching that at all?
I'm only 2 episodes in.
It's an ESPN documentary, 10-part documentary series about Michael Jordan's last season with the Bulls. Mm-hmm. And because I was so engrossed with your novel, I started to project the Faceless Old Woman onto Michael Jordan, because every season of his play is a revenge story. It's like one person on the court slighted him, where it's like Isaiah Thomas didn't shake his hand when he won this first championship. So then it's like, for the next 10 years, he's like, I am going to destroy this dude. And then I started to like populate the rest of the Bulls with your cast of characters, where I'm like, Rodman is definitely Laura, like big guy with a lot of heart and personality, like a showman. And then I was like, I feel like Rebecca is Scottie Pippen, underpaid and underappreciated, but can play any role. I just am like, Andre's probably John Paxson, like kind of keeps his distance, but able to deliver when necessary. It was this joyous sort of collision of two things I was really, really enjoying and infatuated with, and I just started to. So if you ever want to make those parallels on your own, feel free.
This is the best review I've ever received for anything I've ever written, is to compare anything in Night Vale to the Chicago Bulls is really exciting.
But it's really great reading it in terms of one of my favorite authors is George Saunders, and I feel like he's someone where it's like you're laughing 1 minute and then the very next page you're crying, where it's like something like Fox 8. It's like you're guttural laughing out loud, and then the very next page you're like, you just want to crawl into your couch. But I feel like this was so great in terms of the sort of vacillation between horror and comedy. And there's even a line in it that the Faceless Old Woman delivers that says something like, the line between comedy and horror is so thin. And I think that's at the front of this novel, especially for those interstitial parts where we kind of come back to close to present day, or present day on the nose, is so enjoyable. And it's something where I don't the trying to put together that she's the antagonist and the protagonist all at once was such a wild ride and unlike any reading experience I had. And then I think I compared this to a roller coaster earlier. Just the frustrations and the payoffs that where this book goes is so, I don't want to curse on here, I don't know if I can, but so effing great. Sure. Just in terms of one of the more satisfying endings I've read, where you are so you're so on this person's side at times and so against them at times, and then where it ends up at the end is just again one of the better pulling togethers of a story I've ever seen. So congratulations on that, guys.
Thank you
so much.
And I have no reason to praise this book or suck up to you guys because I don't care. But
you usually hate everything we do.
I usually, yeah, I despise Jeffrey. I hate that Meow Wolf shirt you're wearing.
Yep. Yeah. Oh yay, Meow Wolf.
I'm wearing my Meow Wolf bracelet. So.
Oh, fantastic.
I am wearing nothing Meow Wolf.
I feel like you guys, from what I've from the brief interactions I've had with Joseph, and then seeing you guys out in the wild, I feel like you guys have one of the better short shirt games in the business. Like your short sleeve shirt games are on point, both t-shirts and just outright short sleeve button up.
I'm a big fan of very eye-catching prints, and it's always a really fine line to draw, because if you land just on this side of the line, then everyone you meet that day will be like, that's a great shirt, and you'll feel really good. And if you land just on this side, then you're the uncle at the party offering everyone rum. And so it's like, it's a really fine, I will sometimes stand in a store and just like stare at a shirt and be like, which side of the line is this on?
I tend to stick to mostly like podcast t-shirts. I usually have those on, or something cool. Yeah, Meow Wolf was great. Such a
call that
experience.
the Justin McElroy route, where anytime I see Justin, he's got some shirt over top of a podcast to kind of signal boost that.
Yeah, good job, Justin McElroy.
You guys, I think in the back of the book, you guys thank the McElroys. What did they bring to the table for this?
They wrote a good amount of the book. Which was nice for them.
You can tell.
The McElroys have done, we've worked with them on PodCon for twice. And they've just been, they're those guys who, I mean, they've blown up in this really wonderful way, but they're still just like the kind of people who are like, when you're like, hey, can you help me with this? They do every time. And it's just been, they're really lovely people to get to know. In this business, it's as you know, podcasting has become this weird gold rush business for a lot of people, and so it's nice to know the folks who have just been doing it a long time and are very nice, genuine people. And so, thanks to the McElroys.
Absolutely,
I think that's why we put it. There might have been a more specific reason, but
yeah. And
you thanked everybody except for Clint, which I found curious. No, I feel like that's something. Anytime I reach out to Justin, or I'm always like, well, this will take 2 weeks to get back to, and then they get back to me within 5 minutes, and I'm like, they're human just like us.
Yeah. Superhuman. They replied to an email on the day it got sent. It's amazing.
I get excited when I have my 2 reply to emails, and when that list gets below 50, I'm like, I'm feeling so productive right now.
You're doing it. That's great. Just to backtrack slightly to Meow Wolf, just because that place is great. Joseph, have you been to Meow Wolf? Or and Jeffrey, I think you and I went to Sleep No More together. Have you been to any of the sort of immersive theater experiences?
Joseph introduced me to Sleep No More, actually.
Oh, wow.
Sorry. Yeah, go ahead, Joseph.
Oh, yeah. I saw this is a separate story, but I saw Sleep No More in its trial run in Boston.
In the schoolhouse? Is that the...
In the schoolhouse. That was just, I forget how I knew about it. I just, at the time I was seeing a lot of weird theater, and so it just kind of came up. And my then girlfriend, now wife, and I drove up to Boston for a weekend and went and saw Sleep No More. Meow Wolf, we did on our last Night Vale tour. We started in Santa Fe and did a show at Meow Wolf. And it was really, it was an interesting thing because I've heard so much about Meow Wolf over the years. And when that happens, you really prepare yourself for being let down a little bit, because when something's so blown up.
So hyped, yeah. can't possibly.
Yeah,
live
you
up
just
to it.
you're like, there, this will be fine, but I don't want to like expect too much. And then it blew me. Oh, it absolutely blew me away, and was even more impressive than it had been hyped up to be. So it really is amazing when you go to a place that has, for years, people have been like, this place is amazing, and then you go there and you realize that they were underselling it.
That's we made an excuse. My fiance and I made an excuse to go out to Meow Wolf because we're friends with Brian Rosenwurzel from Guster, and they were doing a show there. So we're like, well, this is an excuse to see a concert, to explore the space and then see a concert there. And that place was, every little nook and cranny I just sat in for like 20 minutes and just like let it wash over me. And that was one of the most enjoyable days of my life, just in terms of exploring that space.
It's a so for the people listening who may not know Meow Wolf, in Santa Fe, there is this converted bowling alley that was converted over by an artist collective that essentially turns it into sort of a fantasy dreamscape. Like, I feel like every 20 feet there's just, the scenery changes. So it begins with, you come into, there's a house, or at least that's that's what's been up there. I think they're opening it in different cities with different shows, but it opens up into a fairly normal looking house. When my wife Jillian and I got there, I was looking at like pictures on the wall, and Jillian was looking at the fireplace, and she was like, I think you can crawl through here. And so you just get down on your knees and you crawl through the fireplace. And some people I know entered by opening the dryer and climbing into the dryer. And and you kind of enter all of these really wild rooms. Everyone's sort of stylistically different. There's a room in the back that is just a laser theremin, essentially.
It's very much like as a child, what I thought life would be like. Like when I was 7 to 8 years old, I'm like, this is what the expectations were in terms of what everyday life would be like, and it pays off in dividends.
My favorite little corner was, I was like up in a like an area up in a balcony, and I found a little like hole I could crawl through, and I crawled through, and I found myself in it's like a dark space, and there was just giant animal eyes, probably about 1.5 feet across each of them, covering this entire dome. And then just loud animal noises playing, and then just pillows on the ground. And I just laid there for probably about 20 minutes. I found it so relaxing, just these like floating animal eyes and these animal noises. And it was just like off in a corner. It was not like a main exhibit. I just really enjoyed that little corner of it.
And it's also cool. There's like a story that unfolds throughout, where you're like, oh, there's like a legit through line and a story going on that you can kind of uncover. Kind of like Sleep No More, which I kind of brought up because every time in my sort of, I call it my mind palace, but we'll call it my imagination for now, not to embarrass anyone. But every time I envisioned the Faceless Old Woman, I pictured her in the Sleep No More kind of plague mask. Because to me, that's what it means to not have a face, or to have like a vague face, is like the eye slits and then the stretched out beak.
Yeah.
We decided early on, I mean, we didn't describe her, which is something we always do. We almost never physically describe characters. It's just a choice we make. But we also kind of made some decisions of like, we're never going to say her name. And we're also just we never get explicit about how she ends up losing her face. It's kind of left in this sort of abstract poetic dream logic thing, because it just seemed like there would be no way to make that concrete. That wouldn't be just, I don't know, disappointing. So it seemed more interesting to kind of explain it with poetry. Although Jeffrey almost changed the entire plan with the name thing.
Oh, yeah. I just wanted, when we had the first, when Joseph and I were finishing up our manuscript to send to the publisher, I think it was during that. It was either that or the first pass of edits or whatever. But I just wanted to add at the end,
like the very last sentence,
very last line, right below the just paragraph break, and just write, by the way, my name is Stephanie. And then and then
you got afraid that no one would catch it, and it would end.
No one would catch it.
I'm in love with that. It is funny, of like, while I was reading it, I kept thinking, I was like, oh, the main character, like, because Gemma would walk in and be like, what are you reading? I'm like, well, I'm reading this book. And she was like, she'd asked me what it was about. And I tried to give a summary without giving spoilers because she's going to read it. But I kept being like, oh, what is the lead character's name? And then I'm like, oh, they don't mention it. And that's purposeful. And then I was like, but surely it's been said. And I would like backtrack a little bit and be like, there'd just be moments where I'm like, I've never read a story where I don't know the lead character's name. But it at the same time, it wasn't a hindrance or anything. But it just kept, it was just sort of this ghost in my brain of like, I think there is a name, but I can't quite grasp it, which I think is the perfect effect for this character, to be like, it's in the back of my mind. I can almost see it, but I can't quite make it out. It's a little hazy. Very enjoyable read. That how was it writing a full story about a character without a name? Did you have a placeholder name that you then deleted? Did you first draft write it without the name?
For me, I just think about, like I'm spending so much time with this character. So, you get to know the character really, really well, writing so much about the character. And I think it's similar to like getting to know somebody in your life really well, or an animal really well or something. Like I rarely like my wife and I never call each other by our actual names and, things like that. Like I just think about
names, or what's the,
yeah. Instead of, I just call her Julia, and it's just a slight variation. She calls me Jeremy. So, Jerry Kramer. But yeah, no, it just sort of made sense to like, it was easy enough to like have people call her what's in relationship to them. Like there's, people calling her captain or whatever, things like that. Her father, calling her little one or something like to that effect. But yeah, for the most part, you can get away with writing dialogue where you don't say the other person, where it's not necessary to say the name, in conversation.
Or you can
like
just,
the short,
because you can control the framing of the dialogue, you can just leave the part of the conversation in which people would say names out. Like that's sort of, rarely are you transcribing a conversation from start to finish as it would actually be said. Even if it even if it appears to read that way to the reader, like if you really pay attention, most books, you're providing a best of a conversation to kind of get across the information you need to get across. And so, yeah, that's not the part that felt difficult.
That's great. And it was like I said, it wasn't, at no point was it like a blockade. Like it's something where if you do it too hard, you notice it, but if you don't do it, it's almost imperceptible. In terms of, I've watched Netflix shows where it's like the first scene of the show is like, Melissa, you're my younger sister. And we know you have this problem. And I'm like, I would never talk to my sister that way. I would never call my sister by her name and then say, you're my younger sister. But I guess obviously it's necessary to some degree in a half-hour drama or something. But it's just something I notice anytime.
That is, my mom used to read a ton of mysteries, and she loved like mysteries that had, like a gimmick to them. And one of them she read was written by this rabbi, and it was like rabbis solving mysteries. But the thing was,
this sounds amazing.
You should look it up. I'm sure. I mean, there might actually be a few rabbi solving. I'm sure that's an entire genre. But the rabbis were constantly explaining basic Judaism to each other. And the phrase they would always use is, as you know. And so you just have like two rabbis who are both, have known each other for years and are both rabbis. And they'd be like, well, Joel, as you know, we don't eat leavened bread on Passover. It was just like, I think that's a sort of, it's a difficult thing to get around, but it is important to avoid the as you knows if you can possibly do that.
I feel like that as podcasters, we do that a lot. Like when I first met Jeffrey, it was a lot of like, as you know, Jeffrey, we have pre-roll and mid-roll ads. And
you do?
Yeah.
But it'd be so nice. I think that's it. Is like we were very consciously not saying her name, and we did ask each other we did have a conversation like, do we want to name her? And then we decided let's keep going without doing that. But yeah, I think the trick was like not drawing constant attention to it. I mean, there's a couple of moments where she mentions saying her name to somebody, but it would tend to not kind of keep hitting that super hard, like trying to put enough attention on it to where people recognize that it's a thing happening, but it's not the central point of the book.
Absolutely. And we will we're going to take some audience questions in just a moment here.
You guys should type your
Yeah,
questions into the ask a
Type
There's a
question
little
thing
button
at the
that said
bottom.
"Ask a question."
In just a little
Phil-
bit, we'll get to some audience questions. But yeah, I wanted to. So, do you remember, Joseph? Do you remember the name of these rabbi mysteries? Just in terms
No,
of like,
I had never read them. My mom would tell me about them. I think I'm trying to remember if this was the same. There was an author she liked who had a day job that was like an hour-long train ride from her house, and she would write the novels on the train. And then she moved closer to work and stopped writing. And so she just like abruptly the series ended because she had moved closer to work.
No.
I might be mixing up. I might be kind of combining two different series, but
Okay. I did a search and I found Rabbi Small Mysteries by New York Times bestselling author Harry Kemmelman. Friday
would
the
have
Rabbi
been-
Slept Late. I don't know.
these would
what are
have
some of
been
the titles?
late 90s, I would imagine. These
Okay.
would have been published because I was pretty young, maybe
Stuff
early 2000s.
doesn't have the pub date. Harry
we get
passed
it,
away
Joseph.
in
You're younger than
96.
us. You win.
Friday. Oh, so it was like a days series. So it's Friday the rabbi slept late. Saturday the rabbi went hungry. Sunday the rabbi stayed home, and Monday the rabbi took off. And then that was it. That was the 4 novels
That sounds
from Edgar Award-winning mystery series.
It's almost like
it sounds right. Like, because if it ended after only 4 books, it might have been the one where the person moved closer to work. It just it was kind of only a hobby for them.
What a it's so weird in terms of just that embarrassment of talent, where it's just like, yeah, these are just some things I pounded out on my commute.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's frustrating.
Is there and this is something, if you guys don't want to talk about this, we don't have to, or if there's no answer, then that's fine. Is there anything in terms of like a inspiration for this book in terms of like the style or anything, or books like you mentioned, Joseph, any books that you grew up reading or sort of were hovering in the ether in terms of your mom reading those?
I mean, for this book, again, as Jeffrey said, Count of Monte Cristo was a big one. I remember I read that right out of college, and it felt, it's a very long book, and it's also, it's 150, 200 years old. It's in French, and so you kind of go in with this like heaviness to it, like you expect to kind of have to, and it's such a like light, breezy adventure that is just a page turner for 1,000 pages, and it just takes you over decades and across all of Europe, and it really got me excited. And so it wasn't the same shape of plot, but I did kind of come into this being like, I want this to feel like an adventure. I remember I came up with like a list. I listed as many places that we could realistically have her go, and I just was like, let's see how many of these places we can set scenes in. I just really want this to have this glow popping feel, and there was
a lot of joyous pops for me where I was like, when she would go somewhere or travel somewhere, and especially I'm Palestinian, so there's a moment where she goes to Palestine and there's like this like hurrah, like huzzah, and even later on there's I mean, I don't want to, hopefully this isn't, I'm hopefully not giving anything away, but later on there's a moment where there's mention of like New Orleans, and I'm like, yes, like New Orleans, like my favorite city in America. So there was this thrill of like, especially in these tough times, to be able to escape through this story was so joyous, and literally gave me some like fist raised moments, these sort of like Breakfast Club earring fist pump moments where I was like, yes, this is great. Like I can, and something in terms of like my favorite authors, which I've mentioned George Saunders and like John Irving is someone I really respect, and Matt Haig, and I feel like if you can write if you can describe food and drink in a way that makes my mouth water, you're a phenomenal writer. And the two of you, anytime there's mention of fruit or food or drink, I had to get up and get myself a snack or pour myself a glass of port. Like, it's insane how good you guys are.
We really like food.
Yeah, the descriptive writing, and it's not overbearing in terms of, I know like George R.R. Martin can get into these like chapter long descriptions of like the shape of the neck of a goose that's roasted on a table, and it's like, oh my God, move on. But you guys,
did you ever read Redwall, the Redwall series?
No, that's Brian Jacques, or what's his?
Brian J. I was a huge Redwall fan. I'm still not 100%. I think it's Jake's. That was like the thing I read as a kid. It was such a huge thing for me. The famous thing about that series is anytime they eat, he literally, like, not a joke, he spends a page and a half describing every single course in detail. And I think the story was, I'm trying to remember how old he was, if this makes sense, but I think he was a child during the Blitz in Britain, and there was not enough food. And he would read books, and they would like be like, and then they ate. And he was like, and then they ate what? And he just sort of promised himself. He promised himself that if he ever wrote a book, he would not skip any of, like, he would describe every single thing his characters ate, and he did. It's sort of this weird thing about his books. It's just he will describe in full detail everything anyone eats.
Out of necessity, or just out of need. I love, especially the one that stood out to me the most was, I think it was the Svitzian wine, where it was like, it had an emblem, there's a label on it that was like a dragon eating a sheep or something, and it was like black pepper, honey, full-bodied beef broth, and it's all these, because I'm such an adventurous like eater, and I live to eat, versus eating to live, and it was something that just like I kept rereading, and then literally poured myself some port, went back and read it, and made myself an old fashioned, and I'm like, this is fantastic. So kudos for being so, I mean, again, it's such a target that's easily missed in terms of too little or too much, but you guys really with every food and drink really nailed that.
We used to, when we were on any kind of like tour or whatever, we stayed in a lot of Hampton Inns, but we would, a lot of times, like I think I mostly did this, but like if I was watching Chopped, I would just not really intentionally live tweet it, but I would just have commentary on Chopped quite a bit. And anyways, we ended up getting an email from one of the assistant producers on that show, and she was like, "Oh, I love Night Vale. I saw y'all tweeting about this. Do you want to come on the Chopped set?" And so we got a full tour of the Chopped set. We got to sit in the judges chairs, and
I have pictures. We were told we could never put them on the internet, but I have pictures of Meg and I at the judges table, and then I also took a video, because every episode has this moment. So I took a video of her running for the ice cream machine.
That's I've never been more jealous of anyone in my whole life than you two. Two, if you send me the pictures, I'll post them, and that should avoid any legalese. And three, I'm obsessed with Chopped and Top Chef, and there is like every season there's someone who's like, I'm gonna make this ice cream, and they sprint, and it's always like this race against time that they never win, and then they're scooping
also
out.
Never make panna cotta.
Yeah,
you're making it under TV lights. It will never set. It never sets.
You're gonna be sent home. So
I'm thinking of making a smoked brisket. That's what I'm gonna do with my 30 minutes.
12 hours can be 30 minutes. Let's go to, man, I'm very jealous of you guys. Let's go. We have a question here from Shoshana. This says, which state is Night Vale officially in?
I mean, officially?
This is like almost like Simpsons in Springfield. You guys are
it's whichever state you want it to be in. I mean, I do think it's sort of this mix of, because Jeffrey's from suburban Texas and I'm from suburban Southern California. There is, in terms of like the stores, there's like this mix of California and Texas stores. I know we have like a Ralph's, and someone early on like tracked down every state Ralph's are in to try and figure out where it is. The issue, though, is that it's fictional, and so tracking down real world things about it is going to be difficult.
I'm just gonna say New Hampshire. Let's just lock that in for
Nice
now.
desert area of New Hampshire.
It's in the
We have
desert.
Mhm.
With Magic Tavern. We set the it's in the fantasy world, but we set part of it in Chicago. And the main sort of plot line is a guy falls into a portal behind a Burger King, and we've had so many people be like, "Which Burger King in Chicago?" And we're like, "I don't know. What do you want from us?" And so eventually,
the one with the magic portal behind it. Like, I don't know. Find it.
You'll find it. But eventually, I think we said it's like this specific one on Southport and Irving or whatever. And then that Burger King's Yelp reviews started to be 1 stars. Because people would be like, went to this Burger King, food was delicious, staff could not have been nicer, but a friend of mine fell into a portal. They haven't done anything about it. And we're like, there's real life consequences to your bits. Like, please don't stop. This is hilarious. But also, yeah.
You're like, write the funny review, give them the 5-star or whatever. Yeah. Compliment the staff.
I will say when I listen to Night Vale, for whatever reason, my mind palace, I go to Arizona because that topography in like Sedona and maybe a little bit even like Santa Fe, but that area of the world, especially Arizona, for whatever reason, I like to imagine it there. Thank you, Shoshana, for that question. We have another one here. How any chance of Arnie and Cecil ever interviewing each other? So this would be Arnie from Magic Tavern, the host of Magic Tavern, and Cecil, the narrator.
So they're asking if 2 people. They're asking a question for 2 people who aren't here. Okay.
Yeah, let's sign them up for that.
Yeah.
Do you want to hear? You text Arnie. I'll text Cecil.
Yeah.
I just got a text back, and the answer is yes. But in which timeline? Maybe
That's
not
true.
ours.
That's a very good question.
Here's what. So I'm just going by what's getting the most upvotes here. So that question was by Jessica Keith. Thank you, Jessica, for that. Next one we have is from I believe it's pronounced Jeannie, Jini, Jeannie or Ginny. How did the idea of Night Vale begin? Origin story.
Yeah, we were writing a play together in 2010, 2011 that we performed in the East Village. And while we were doing it, we spent a lot of time. We would kind of start every writing session by just talking about podcasts we were listening to. We were both very into podcasts. It's weird because people are always like, "Oh, you were like one of the first podcasts." And when we started our podcast, I really felt like we were so late to the game. Like there was such an established world of podcasts already. But I knew like I wanted to do a podcast, but I knew that we couldn't do a like 2 guys chatting podcast. Partly because there was a bunch of people already doing those better than we could. So just and we were writers, so that kind of is what made sense to do. And I've just always been super obsessed with conspiracy theories. I think they're really fascinating stories. I would get like books on Men in Black and UFOs from the library and just kind of devour them. And like it's been a dream from very early on. I've had this idea of like a world where every conspiracy theory is true, and I made like a few shots at it earlier on. Actually, just on the Night Vale Patreon, I put up one of my early tries at that, and it's not good. I did a few like very not good versions of this, and then finally with Night Vale kind of hit on an angle that worked and brought Jeffrey in, and he started kind of developing out the world, and together kind of turned into this thing.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Was that at Neo Futurists?
Yeah, we met through the Neo Futurists. Cecil and I and Meg, who does the the credits and the Proverbs on every show and is the MC of our live shows. We were all in the Neo Futurists together, and so and Joseph and I met in like 2009. Joseph was pretty involved with the Neo Futurists. He volunteered and things like that, and came to see the show quite a bit. And he and I got to talking. I did a play for the Neos called Bucket O Blank, and I just had a big pickle bucket and I filled it with ashes of a book that I burned. And so I burned a book that I really despised, and I did a play about that book.
Name it, or?
No, part of the play was I don't want to tell you what it is because then you'll go buy it. And And so, but it was just this notion of kind of obliquely talking about a book I didn't like. And I remember Joseph came up to me afterwards and what was the word you used? Was it immoral? Immoral. He was he did compliment the play. He's like, I enjoyed the play, but I think it's immoral.
It was it was an impeccably written play, but it's just, as a Jewish kid, you get it drilled into your head that there is nothing worse than desecrating a book. And so it just horrified me.
Yeah, I think, yeah, and I definitely agree with Joseph. I think it's one of those plays where I'm like, oh yeah, I think that's a thing to consider. And it's like, I don't know, it was just it was an interesting conversation because it was more interesting than like, great job, like your plays, that was really funny. Like it was, I don't know, we had talked before that, but it was no, it was interesting. And so when we were just chatting one day online, we're like, let's do so. Let's figure something out. Let's write something. And so we started meeting to write a play. And yeah, that's what we did. We wrote a play, and then we did the podcast thing because it was more sustainable.
For listeners and for viewers, I do want to say that Jeffrey just sent me an email that said the book was The 5 People You Meet in Heaven. So there you go. That's the answer.
I do remember that. After I got to know Jeffrey, he did finally tell me the book, and I felt very special because I was one of the few people who knew which book it was.
So you've read it?
You Made in Heaven. I have not read that.
It was Tuesdays with Maury.
I have not read the book. It's not a book I would seek out to read.
Joseph, have you listened to? I think it's called Coast to Coast, the radio program.
I haven't. I think Jeffrey, you listened to that a bit.
I listened
right?
to it some as a kid. Every now and then I could get the radio signal in my room.
So I started a sort of conspiracy-esque podcast a while ago that was based on that, because on a road trip one time, like a 20-hour road trip, I found this show called Coast to Coast, and it was basically this host being like, we have a caller, and the caller's like, hey, this is Melissa, and like the demon's back, and it's like the demon keeps trying to pull my covers off my bed, and I'm like, please stop, and the host would be like, oh, absolutely, so okay, so what's and there's there's not a hint of skepticism in his voice. Like he immediately is like, absolutely, everything you say is true. And then somebody else would call and be like, yeah, I wore my grandma's earrings again, and now I'm cursed. Like every time I go to the store, the doors won't open. And I was just like, mouth agape, being like, this is the wildest thing I've ever heard, and I need to do something with this. But yeah,
you've heard the clip of the guy flying into Area 51, right?
No, I haven't.
Look it up on YouTube. A caller called in from a light aircraft flying into Area 51. There's been some. There was also a time traveler who called in once. If you go to YouTube, you can find some the highlights.
Yeah. Did the government recently admit to aliens or something? I saw some tweet where
there's always something coming out where some other government file, or that recently, was it the Navy or Air Force or whatever, had shown videos where they were dealing with an unidentified aircraft of some sort.
I feel like maybe the guy from Blink 182. I don't know if it's Mark Hoppus or the other guy. Whoever's deep into conspiracies.
As a high school huge Blink 182 fan, I can tell you it's Tom who is
Tom DeLonge,
the major. Yes, he is the major. He quit Blink 182 to prove UFOs, and then 3 years later, got the Navy to release photos of UFOs. So mission accomplished, I guess.
All the small things. I guess he had a point. I can't wait to look all these things up. Here's a question from Eleanor Hamburger. That has to be a real name. Eleanor Hamburger says, so it has been stated as a fact that Night Vale is still searching for a cure to throat spiders, but Kevin mentions that in Desert Bluffs, throat spiders are easily cured diseases. Does Desert Bluffs just refuse to give Night Vale the cure, or what?
Probably. Yeah, that'd be my bet. That's where I'm going to go with that. Yes.
We have another question here. This is from Cole. Cole says, you said not saying the main character's name wasn't the most difficult thing about writing this book. What was the most difficult thing?
I mean, it's just such a big book with so many moving parts, and also just a lot of moving parts that are maybe not immediately apparent to the reader. We were doing a lot of stuff with structure that we kind of knew most readers wouldn't notice, but it was just sort of there for us. There's a lot of hidden structural stuff to the book that to kind of balance that and then the bigger story. But I'd say for me, part 4 was the most difficult. Jeffrey?
I think pacing, this like long, like covering this much time, I think is a thing. Like we tried to address the pacing with the structure of like starting with, and the book didn't end up holding this original, but for the structure and how we broke it down to write it was like starting with really short chapters and then going on into longer and longer chapters. The book doesn't do that, but in our mindset that was
getting rid of all that.
Yeah, the chapter structure, but so the chapter heads aren't in the same place, but it also, there was so much rewriting in there too. But yeah, for me, it was section 3, the captain section. That was a section
you
that
almost completely rewrote that.
That section is about 14,000 words. And then I remember Joseph and I having a conversation after we had done our very first rough draft of each section. And Joseph had a lot of questions, and they were all questions that I had for myself too, and was like, this needs some rework. And I did some rework over a couple of weeks, and then eventually we were kind of hitting deadline time, and I ended up just rewriting most of it. I rewrote at final count when I looked back of like what I had started with. It was about 11,500 words of that 14,000 got rewritten in just a few days. But once I figured out like the pacing for that, it really flowed out in a really great way. But yeah, there's just a few moments like that where you realize like, oh, this chapter 3 or this section 3 isn't flowing into section 4. It's not ending in a way that makes us keep going with that. And so yeah, all these different stories over so much, 200 plus years of this woman's life. Yeah, I think that was probably the biggest challenge.
So just having it freshly read it, something I was very impressed by was whenever you bounce back to sort of what I'll call present day for the most part, I was so impressed by how much I was looking forward to those, even though I was enjoying the main story so much. And then how well you balanced again the comedy in terms of like there would be one page that had like a toe curling scenario going on, and then the next page opposite that had there's a funny slogan for Ford, or like a creepy slogan for Ford that made me like guffaw out loud. And there's another moment where it's like a reimagining of a Leonardo da Vinci painting that made me like stop and close the book and laugh for like 3 minutes. So just that being able to balance that, the horror and comedy, where I wasn't sweeping one under the rug to pay attention to the other. I was feeling both at the same time. Felt like that was, I saw the craft and I saw the work and the sweat put into that. So I thought that was really cool. This is from Jordan. Jordan says, is there a podcast or TV series or book that you've been enjoying recently during quarantines and would recommend? Oh, Quarantimes. I'm sorry.
Quarantimes. I just finished, on Joseph's recommendation, I just finished the novel, The Lager Queen of Minnesota. And it was hecka good, and I really liked it a lot. I thought it was charming and wonderful, and it's a series of stories that sort of like kind of almost like short stories of like intertwining characters over a few generations, and it's realistic, and it's escapist, and it's interesting, and it's deep, and I found it completely charming. So yeah, there's a good book, and it was a very quick read.
Yeah, I when I recommend that book to people, I have a hard time giving a reason. I'm just like, I love this book. I just love it. It's beautiful. I don't know what else to say about it.
Can I get the name one more time? I'm gonna read this.
The Lager Queen, Lager, The Lager Queen of Minnesota.
I'm gonna name a podcast, a TV series, and a book. Podcast. Rude Tales of Magic. I don't know if you've heard this, Adel.
I just have. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's so funny.
It's really fun. It's one of the few podcasts that, like most podcasts, I just kind of cycle through and save up a bunch of new episodes and then listen to them all at once. And Rude Tales is one of these ones where when a new one comes out, I get very excited and I listen to it right away. And it's just, it's a actual play D&D podcast. If you're a fan of the Adventure Zone and has kind of the vibe of the early days when they didn't really know how to play D&D and it was just very chaotic. And it's that kind of very chaotic, very funny vibe. TV
the guy who
series.
DMs that, I forget his name, but the guy who DMs
Branson
that reminds
Reese.
me of like a young Robin Williams, like that frenetic energy, but he's so in control of it. Where I'm like, surely this will go off the rails, but every time he has such a tight grasp on it.
TV series, everyone should watch *Halt and Catch Fire*. It's the most beautiful show that no one's seen. And book, the Glass Hotel by Emily St. John Mandel that came out the same day as this book is a really beautiful book about. It's not at all about a pandemic, but it is about people having to deal with their lives suddenly not being what they thought they were going to be and having to deal with the aftermath of that. And so I found a lot of what it said about that very helpful.
And that's called The Glass
Hotel. Just came out a few weeks ago.
Thank you. That's wonderful. I'm adding all of these to my list. This is from Travis. It says, we can only assume Travis McElroy. So I'll read it in that voice. No, I won't. I've been following Night Vale since the beginning days. Did you ever think it would get this big when you first started?
Totally.
Yeah, Jeffrey was I thought I was very confused, but he was like, he described to me 3 books. He was like, we're gonna end up at the main stage of the Sydney Opera House.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, we've had 100 downloads.
Oh, this quarantine has made me forget how much Jeffrey's personality sucks. Like, what an ego.
Yeah, I mean, when we started out, our entire ambition was that someone we didn't personally know would ever listen to it. That was literally it. There was not really another ambition.
Was there, and this may be hard to sort of pinpoint, but was there like a moment or a episode or an event that sort of solidified in your souls, like, oh my gosh, there's no looking back now?
I think it seems like it might have been the San Francisco show, right? Like the Booksmith show, maybe, or was
long
it
before that for me? Because this was it. We blew up, like the explosion was in July of 2013, and I had a rough day job. I tried to get people to sign up for green energy on the streets of New York. So I would sit at a table and be like, hey, have you signed this? You sign this. I'd do that for 5 hours. I paid per sign up. So if no one signed up, I didn't get paid. And I was doing a shift of that. And I looked at my phone and we had an offer from like a major media company to buy Night Vale outright. And I just had this moment of like, why am I at this job? And that was the last shift I worked. We did not accept the offer because we had no interest in selling it. But it was just this moment of like, what am I doing? Still trying to get people to do this.
Yeah, almost the recognizing of your own value through the lens of someone else. Like that's inspirational. That's really cool. Jeffrey, how about you? You said the show in San Francisco.
Yeah, I mean, oh yeah, maybe that. Actually, yeah, I was gonna say probably before, like on our 1-year anniversary, we did a show at Webster Hall in New York City in the Village, and it was we did it in their like upstairs bar space because we knew a guy there that we'd done other not Night Vale events before, readings and things like that, like little one-off events, and yeah, so we ended up having like 115 people show up for this, and we didn't know how, like, we weren't charging for it. We were like, suggested donation, $5 at the door. Like, that's how we did it. But yeah, then we ended up having like 115 people show up, and this was sort of at a time when we were like, I just don't know what it means to do a Night Vale live show, but we did our 25th episode 24, I think. Anyways, we did that day on our 1-year anniversary, and it was really wild just to see the faces of everyone who listens to your show, because we'd gotten a few tweets and we'd gotten a couple of emails like, I love your show. We didn't know about Tumblr or anything like that. Like that was part of, I think, where it was catching fire. But yeah, just to suddenly see, like, I didn't know who our audience was, like, and then you just see a whole bunch of people that don't look like the friends, your friends that come to all of your shows when you're like, hey, come to my theater piece in the East Village. Come watch my improv class showcase or whatever. Like, you just see the same people over and over again. Yeah, and I was just, I think that was the moment where I didn't know that it was like going to be as big as it was, but it was the first moment I realized, like, oh, I had made something that attracted people that wasn't just like, hey, I'm, just all of my friends and their friends, basically.
That's great. I've had so many of those. That's just made me rush back to my past where I've had so many of those improv shows where I'm like, come check out my show. And then afterwards I see them in the lobby and I'm like, I'm sorry you came out to the I'm so sorry. Is that you said episode 25, 24, 25? Is that on the
Yeah,
main
it would have been
feed?
25.
We
That's
never
the
put the
first-
recording out.
Okay. Is there
Yeah.
so
Oh,
you
okay.
guys have a Patreon. What all is on the Patreon?
Lots of stuff. We do behind the scenes notes for every episode. We do a weekly. We've started a weekly text feature that is before they were Night Vale, that features early writing from Jeffrey and I. That's where I put up that early try at a world where every conspiracy theory is true. And we've also been doing weekly Night Vale quarantine variety shows where it's us and
Yes, please.
guests.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's just meant to be like a bit of performance. There's poetry and readings of like work, various non-Night Vale and Night Vale works we've written and songs. They kind of vary depending on who the guest is, but the idea is just to be, since we can't do Night Vale live shows now, to just do a little bit of performance for people and
That's
take them
wonderful.
away for a little bit.
Yeah. And holy hell, have you guys created such a great stable of artists and talent. That's really wonderful. Next question here is from John. John says, how did Mara Wilson come to be the voice of the Faceless Old Woman?
Twitter. Yeah. We just knew her on Twitter, and we saw that she had found Night Vale and was enjoying it, and that she lived in New York City at the time. And so we just asked her, well, you want to do a voice sometime? She was like, sure. And she went over to Joseph's apartment and to his old
and I was
studio
living
apartment.
in like this like collapsing studio apartment in Brooklyn. There was like black ooze coming down the heating pipes. It was not the most professional studio environment. I had to read into my what's the snowball mic, the blue snowball.
Oh yeah.
Mhm.
Had to read into one of those. Like she arrived so professional, and she's like, I've read the sides, and I'm like, there is a disconnect between your professionalism. It worked out.
And-
we became good friends with her.
Yeah.
That's great. Any podcaster who hasn't owned a Snowball or Blue Yeti is not a real podcaster.
No, there's
who
some.
hasn't struggled with those tech issues.
Yeah.
I just watched Matilda for the first time a few months ago, and she's one of the best child actors I've ever seen in my life. I
I'll
mean,
be
obviously
honest,
she's not a child now, but
I've been friends with her for almost a decade, and I have not seen Matilda or Miracle on 34th Street. I think was her other big movie. I did see when I was her age, because I think we're about the same age. She's a little younger than me. I saw Mrs. Doubtfire, but other than that, I have mostly missed her filmography.
so good. Here we go. We're gonna do. We have two more questions we're gonna do, and then we'll wrap up here. Our penultimate question is from Isla. What is one of your favorite proverbs from Night Vale? And to buy you guys some time, I will say this isn't a proverb at all, but something that made me chuckle, even though it was an inside joke at the time. My fiance, when she was asking me what I was reading, when I finished, I mentioned the book, and then I said I would give my left narp to be able to read this from the beginning without knowing what happened. And she's like, what? And I was like, I would give my left narp. And she's like, what are you talking about? But that just tickled me where I'm like, once you read this, you'll understand what I'm doing.
I pulled up a list from a.
Yeah, I just pulled up a list
from a
as well
wiki.
to look through.
I'm just gonna pick one I wrote because I normally don't do this, but I don't know. I forgot about this one, and I like this one. I've got more rhymes than the Bible's got Psalms. 151. I've got 151 rhymes.
Perfect. And that was Jay-Z?
That was Jay-Z.
I will also pick a proverb I wrote recently. I think I wrote this one. I'm pretty sure. Nothing lasts forever is a phrase with two meanings, and they're both true.
Beautiful.
That's
I love
good.
that. Last question here, and then I think we'll hand it over. We'll see if Ware is still here. Last question is from Eleanor, and she says, are you ever going to do an episode set in Pine Cliffs?
Hopefully we have enough time in our lives to do all of the things that are possible in the world. And so, yeah, given enough time and in infinite possibilities with infinite time, then yes, that would definitely happen.
Yeah,
I don't have anything. I don't have
Night
anything
Vale
on
is
the.
such a like whatever is interesting to us now kind of deal, and so
But Pine Cliff
what
is
would
a
have to
town.
happen if yeah, go ahead.
No, I was going to say Pine Cliff's a town inhabited entirely by ghosts, so it feels like there's a lot to happen there. I just haven't written it yet.
Yeah, it just would one of us would need to get interested in it at the right time for that to
Mhm.
happen. So maybe.
There you go. Thank you all so much. Thank you, Jeffrey and Joseph, for having me be a part of this.
Yeah,
Again,
thanks,
I cannot state enough how much I love this book. If you are on,
I also own it.
we're all holding it up.
Yay!
Depth perception. Here, I'll be the Gandalf. Wait, no, Gandalf was Gandalf was back here.
Yeah.
Buy this book. I cannot say enough. I was in a bit of a rut due to current times. I was not reading a ton. I was mostly watching Netflix. I was mostly reading short stories. And this book came along and I could not get enough of it. So please buy this book. It will make for a better experience. It will brighten your week. It'll brighten your day. Please pick it up, check it out, and then talk to me about it. Reach out and message me, and let's talk about our favorite parts. So pick that up, please. That is The Faceless Old Woman Who Secretly Lives in Your Home. Joseph Fink, Jeffrey Cranor, thank you all so much for your time and talent. Congratulations again on such a phenomenal book. And I'm slowly realizing that we're live from Town Hall Seattle with Adel, which is a joke I would probably make, but I missed it. So when you see me, you see Seattle, and we're Town Hall of Seattle. Thank you to Weir, thank you to Sean, thank you to John, the whole Town Hall Seattle crew for setting this up. And I believe someone's going to pop in to give us an outro or take us to the end here.
Sure.
Hi,
Perhaps.
Adel, I'm going to have to boot you. This is Josh from Town Hall.
Please do.
Right.
So everyone say goodbye.
Wait, I'm so sorry. Before I go, can I cause a scene?
Yeah.
Go right ahead.
What are you, some sort of tough guys? You guys ain't all that. What is this? What's that shirt? I like that shirt. Too much. Meow Wolf? Meow this. Come at me. I don't know. I'm sorry.
I like it.
I'm sorry you came to the show.
Bye, Adel.
Bye. And now it's just us. Hi everyone.
Hi.
There's
Hello.
a button to buy the book right here.
Oh yeah.
I'm
Buy
not
the
clear if
book.
someone's going to hop on to outro this, but if not,
Okay.
looks like it is. Hi.
Yay! Hi, Shane.
I'm Shane. I'm here at Town Hall Seattle. Thank you so much, you guys, for being here tonight. We really appreciate it. And thank you for everybody who's joined in this evening. If you enjoyed this event, you can find many more like it on our website, townhallseattle.org. We also hope that you'll consider making a donation to Town Hall Seattle, especially today and tomorrow during the Give Big 2020 campaign, when thousands of people show their support for their favorite Washington nonprofits. Your gifts will be matched dollar for dollar by generous anonymous donor, and your support will continue to allow us to provide events like tonight into the coming year, both here online and hopefully very soon back in our own building. So we hope that you'll consider a gift by visiting givebigwa.org/townhallseattle to donate. If you're interested in purchasing a copy of the book, as they mentioned, you can click the Buy a Book button down there through our partners at the University Bookstore. And we hope that you will support local independent bookstores in this time as well. And again, thank you everyone for being here tonight, and we hope you have a great evening.
Awesome.